It seems to me like a slam dunk, right? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime, and Crue Trime. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, guess what? You're in the right place. Okay, so subscribe. We'll just skip it. So today's story is super frustrating and, spoiler alert, unsolved. So let's get into it. This is the story of Robert Wone. Side note, I don't really talk about the makeup as I'm using it, so if you want to know what everything is, look down in the description box because everything is linked. Picture this. It's August 2nd, 2006 in Washington, D.C. George W. Bush is the president, MySpace is still a thing, and we were all clinging to our low-rise jeans like they were ever a good idea. Meanwhile, Robert Wone, a 32-year-old attorney, husband, and all-around stand-up person, heads over to his college buddy Joe Price's house for a sleepover. Yes, a grown-up sleepover. Because adulting is hard, and sometimes you just need to crash at your buddy's place after work. Well, before the sun rose the next morning, Robert Wone was dead. He had been stabbed in the guest room with a kitchen knife. And the story only gets weirder from here. But before we get too far ahead, let's back it up a little bit. Robert Eric Wone was born on June 1st, 1974 in New York City. He was a fourth-generation Chinese American growing up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Robert was super duper smart, like mega smart, and he was very serious about school. He graduated first in his class from Xavier High School, and then he went on to the College of William and Mary as a James Monroe Scholar, which really means it was like a full ride academic scholarship. Xaverian.
Today, Junior?
Am I saying that right? Probably not. Robert wasn't just smart as shit. He was also incredibly kind and deeply committed to public service. He didn't really drink. He didn't do drugs at all. He was described as painfully polite. I mean, this guy probably returned library books early. Robert knew from a very young age that he wanted to do work to benefit the community at large. After Robert graduated from William and Mary in 1996, he went on to the University of Pennsylvania to law school, and he earned his Juris Doctorate with honors, of course. Robert took his shiny new JD in 1999, and he moved to Washington, D.C. to practice commercial real estate law, and he also served as the general counsel for the Organization of Chinese Americans. He did a lot of this kind of work in his off time, which, how do you have off time when you're a lawyer? I don't know. Well, the pretty meticulous and routine-oriented Robert was pretty quiet about his romantic life. He wasn't really a casual dater. But on June 7th, 2003, Robert got married to his girlfriend, Catherine Ellen Yu. According to close friends, it was a whirlwind romance that went from dating to marriage really quickly, but it seems to me like Robert was just private. Initially, it was kind of a long-distance thing. Robert was in D.C., and Kathy was in Chicago, and he would travel there a lot, but then she moved this way. They were very much in love, happily married, living in suburbia out in Oakton, Virginia. A few years later, Robert moved on from real estate law and he took a job as the general counsel for Radio Free Asia. And Radio Free Asia is like a nonprofit news service for Asian audiences, and it promotes like democracy and human rights. So on the night of August 2nd, 2006, Robert had been working late with the night crew of Radio Free Asia, and he typically took the metro into DC every day. Actually, him and his wife would commute in together from Oakton, but he knew it was going to be a super late night, and he didn't want to disturb his wife on like a random Wednesday. So that night, he actually planned to stay in town at a friend's house. His friend lived in DuPont Circle, which was just a few blocks away from his work. Around 9:30 at night, Robert called Kathy to tell her goodnight, and then after wrapping up a few more things at the office, he took his little overnight bag with his PJs and his toiletries, and he headed over to 1509 Swan Street Northwest, the home of Joe Price, arriving at about 10:30 at night. So Joe and Robert actually went way back. He had known Joe since he was about 18 years old, a freshman at William and Mary. When they met, Joe was a senior, but they'd found themselves kind of in the same social circles, you know, campus leadership, extracurricular clubs, and they shared similar career aspirations. Very ambitious people, these two. After Joe graduated, he went on to snag his law degree from the University of Virginia, but he and Robert kept in touch, and they maintained a pretty close friendship over the years. Joe was very active in the LGBTQ advocacy community. He actually later helped to found and serve as general counsel for Equality Virginia, which is a gay rights advocacy group headquartered in Washington, D.C. Joe was very charismatic, driven, articulate, well-connected in the D.C. legal and LGBTQ circles. He was really crushing it, but behind the professional polish, he had this penchant for control. Think the guy who organizes a really elaborate potluck but then wants to micromanage all the dishes.
The end table is wrong, the couch looks bizarre, and don't even get me started on the refrigerator magnets.
Anyways, Joe was in a long-term relationship with Victor Zaborski, and they had a third roommate named Dylan Ward. So Dylan was originally a tenant in the basement apartment of another home that Joe owned in somewhere else in DC. But when he decided to relocate to the house on Swan Street, Dylan came with and was renting one of the bedrooms. So really this was a throuple kind of a situation. We now know that it was more like two-way relationships, with Joe being in a relationship with Dylan and also in a relationship with Victor, but Victor and Dylan were not. But anyway, whatever, it worked for them, and Robert accepted and supported his friend, and they were great friends. You know, Joe even threw Robert's surprise 30th birthday party at the house on Swan Street. So it's August 2nd, and Robert got to Joe's house around 10:30 that night. Robert, Joe, and Victor kind of stood around in the kitchen chatting and, having a glass of water or whatever for a few minutes. And Dylan was upstairs in his bedroom that was on the second floor. Victor then took Robert upstairs to where they'd set up the pull-out couch in the guest room. That was sort of on the other side of the staircase from Dylan's room. So when you got up on the top of the stairs, that's Dylan's room, and then you go around and then that's the guest room. August in DC is hot and sticky and disgusting. So Robert really wanted to take a shower before he hit the sack, so that's what he did. All the guys just kind of said goodnight and, went up to bed. Victor and Joe's bedroom was up on the third floor, and they were just sort of laying in bed watching TV until about 11 o'clock-ish when they turned it off to go to sleep. So at some point, not really that long after, maybe an hour later, Joe heard the chime of one of the doors opening in the house. When you have a security system at your house and a door opens, sometimes it's beep, 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 or whatever sound it makes at your house. So he wasn't necessarily alarmed, but he was confused. And then he started hearing the sound of grunts or muffled yelling, and then a scream. So Victor and Joe jumped out of bed and they ran downstairs, and they found Robert lying on the guest bedroom with blood on his chest. There was also a knife either sticking out of him still or laying on top of him. A little confusion about that because Joe sort of relayed two different versions of this story to the police. We'll get to that. Anyways, Victor was hysterical. He ran back upstairs to the bedroom to call 911. By this time also, Dylan was awake, although he was still in his bedroom. So their thought was, oh my God, there must have been some kind of burglary, a home invasion, an intruder. And they must have gotten in the house and attacked Robert. Well, when Joe finally went downstairs, he saw that the front door was locked, but the back door was open. So the ambulance arrived pretty quickly, and when the paramedics arrived, they said that this trio of men were a little too calm for three people who had just found their friend Swiss cheesed in the guest room. They were also all wearing white terry cloth bathrobes.
That's suspicious.
Freshly showered.
That's weird.
Cool, calm, and collected. So the state of the room where Robert had been found was shocking. So he'd been stabbed to death in a struggle that was loud enough for Joe and Victor to hear it upstairs, but there was no blood Okay, all right, so there wasn't like zero blood, but it was very, very little for somebody who had been stabbed to death. There was just a couple of small pools on the top sheet and a very, very small amount on a towel that was on the floor. No other blood anywhere. No spatters, no drips, no smears. And the knife that was on the side table had come from downstairs, the knife block in the kitchen. Oh, the knife was on the side table now because Joe said when he went in there and found Robert, he either pulled the knife out and set it on the table or found it laying on top of him and moved it, set it on the table. At the foot of the bed was a small table that had Robert's wallet, watch, BlackBerry, and his clothes all neatly folded. Nothing else in the room was disturbed. Even like the blankets on the bed were still like neatly tucked. So bizarre. How did that happen? Well, the three men got dressed and they went down to the police station for questioning. They were questioned separately. Joe Price clearly emerged as kind of like the leader of the house. You know, he had answers for everything that they asked. He was very confident, you know, teetering on arrogant, although very cooperative. Victor Zaborski was a little bit more subdued and quiet. Fun little nugget, Victor actually worked in marketing for the International Dairy Food Association, whatever. And he was the head of the Got Milk ad campaign. Do you remember this? What a time capsule. Dylan Ward, who kind of was all over the place. I think he was a trained chef. He had a degree in some kind of literature. And then he was also like a trained masseuse. A lot of different things. Anyway, he was also pretty quiet, but cooperative. And all three men separately presented the same story. Nobody changed a word. But the police were squinting. So there was literally no evidence of a home invasion, of an intruder of some kind, a burglary. Nothing in the house had been taken. Nothing in the house had even been disturbed, you know, except their dead friend in the guest room. Now, in their questioning, the police could not understand how a straight married man was having an adult sleepover with three gay men. They insinuated that this was some kind of weird sex thing and maybe they had indulged in too much wine and, you know, whatever ignorant shit they came up with. I mean, during the questioning, Joe even said, Robert is not even kind of gay. He's very, very, very straight. But here's where things go full David Lynch. Police believe that the crime scene was staged. Shocking, I know. Within 2 weeks, police told the Washington Post that they believed that the crime scene evidence had all been cleaned away. Chemical agents and other detection methods indicated that there were blood traces on the walls and floor and the door frame, the sofa bed. But later on, it was determined that their application of the chemical agent was done incorrectly, so all of it was wrong. They also brought in human remains detection dogs, and the dogs alerted on the front of the dryer, like the lint trap, and around a downstairs drain area, but no actual blood evidence was ever found. This investigation also revealed a treasure trove of BDSM gear in Dylan's bedroom. This included a lot of photos and videos and equipment, accessories.
It's a dildo.
An electric shock device and restraints. And okay, no kink shaming here, but this wasn't a casual collection, okay? It was elaborate. Everything that you could possibly imagine and things you didn't know existed.
Your dildo.
I don't own.
And the inventory of items that they found was pages long. Multiple pages.
You know what I love? You are so organized. Yes. You're very anal about...
They also found a 3-piece carving set, you know, that you would use at Thanksgiving. The big 2-pronged fork, big knife, and small knife. But the small knife was missing. Robert may have been drugged, incapacitated, and assaulted before being murdered. Robert's autopsy revealed that his cause of death was homicide. Duh. He had been stabbed 3 times in the chest, and one of those went right through his heart. The wounds were almost surgically precise, you know, no jagged edges, no hesitation marks. When the forensic evidence of the wounds was compared to the knife that was found at the scene, they didn't match. Even weirder, Robert didn't have any defensive wounds at all. Not a scratch. And this strongly suggests that he was incapacitated, you know, either by being unconscious or being paralyzed. The medical examiner found puncture marks on his body that might have been from injections of some kind. So, yeah, there's a theory that Robert might have been drugged with a paralytic agent. But the toxicology didn't find anything. Could be that the drugs just metabolized quickly, or maybe they just weren't, testing for the right ones. Typically in those kinds of examinations, they're testing for general things, common things, illicit drugs, alcohol, blah, blah, blah. So after the investigators discovered all that BDSM stuff at the house, they asked the medical examiners to also perform a sexual assault kit. This meant that they were going to examine Robert's body for evidence of trauma or sexual activity. They swabbed his, swimsuit area, and in and around his downtown Julie Brown eye, bingo bango, semen. Somebody was about to be in big trouble. So now that they've got this sample, they're going to be able to connect it to somebody else, so they sent it away for testing, and guess who it belonged to? Robert.
What?
It was Robert's own semen inside his no-no hole. So how did it get there, you might ask? Well, remember when I said that there are devices that you didn't know existed? The extractors, depositors. I'm not going any further. So basically the autopsy was like this neon sign saying this man was immobilized, violated, and murdered with extreme precision. But with no drugs found in his system, and the autopsy didn't reveal evidence of forcible assault or sexual activity aside from his own
Can you earmuff it for me?
semen found inside his rectum. And if you're screaming at your screen right now, same. What the hell happened? Some people even speculate that those puncture marks that were found on Robert's body might not have been just injections. They might have been withdrawals. What's the word for that? Drawing blood draws. They might have taken his blood that way. Further investigation revealed a lot of porn materials, mostly homemade and mostly between Joe Price and Dylan Ward. Joe was in charge of that household, but he wasn't in charge of anything during the encounters with Dylan, if you know what I'm saying. And this wasn't simple fuzzy handcuffs and maybe a light spanking. This was the most extreme stuff that you could dream up. Torture, sensory deprivation, humiliation.
Stop it.
Confinement, pain, you get it. And again, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, you know what I mean? And just because somebody enjoys such a thing doesn't necessarily make them prone to escalate to murder. But in this case, it sure fucking looks like it. Was this an accident? Was this purposeful? Was this an escalation of Joe and Dylan's sub-dom relationship? Was the very, very straight and happily married square Robert secretly into BDSM and gay sex? Well, there was no evidence found that would even suggest that Robert was curious about such things, let alone participate in it. The investigators searched his home, his work computer, his personal computer, his BlackBerry, clean as a whistle. On the night of August 2nd, 2006, Robert showered, brushed his teeth, he put in his night guard, and then he went to sleep. At Robert's funeral the next week, his friend Joe was a pallbearer. Robert's widow, Kathy, believed the story of this intruder. Why wouldn't she? Why would one of Robert's longest time friends kill him? The rest of Robert's friends weren't so hopeful. It just seemed like the more the investigation went on, the more they looked into things, the less it progressed. Sure, there was a ton of theories about what could have happened and who could have or couldn't have been involved, but it went nowhere. Joe, Victor, and Dylan actually sold that house on Swan Street and moved to Florida. Because of course they did. Nobody was charged with murder. Let me repeat that. Nobody was charged with murder. So a full 2 years went by, and in late 2008, the police weren't ready to give up and they decided to pivot. Translation, we can't prove that you killed him, but we know you know something and you are lying through your veneers. On October 27th, 2008, Dylan Ward was arrested on charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. The strategy from police was to get him separated away from Joe and Victor, to try to isolate him and get him to turn on the other two. It didn't work. His story never changed, and soon after that, Joe and Victor were indicted on the same charges. Interesting fact, up until that point, the affidavits from the investigation that outlined all the BDSM equipment that they found in the house wasn't known to the public. It wasn't known to Kathy, it wasn't known to their other friends. And that intruder story, while flimsy, was really all there was. Well, Kathy Wone was gobsmacked, totally betrayed. She wanted to believe that intruder story, and for a long time she did. But now with all the dirty details public for all the world to see, things were different. Kathy was no dummy. You know, she was a shrewd, astute attorney. And over the last 2 years, she had watched Robert's friends move on, unwilling to explain what even happened. But now she understood why. When the case finally got to trial in 2010, it was a mess. The state relied heavily on the throuple thing, you know, that these 3 men were some kind of bizarre, deviant sex freaks. Like, they were consenting adults, okay, so everybody just relax. Now, Joe's attorney successfully got all of that BDSM evidence thrown out. His client's sexcapades were irrelevant to a home invasion intruder case. Further, the defense requested a bench trial, which effectively eliminated the jury. The statistics on jury trials in murder cases reaching a guilty verdict is 7 out of 10. But the bench trial would leave the decision in the judge's hands alone. This trial didn't need to determine if the 3 men are the ones who killed Robert. It just needed to decide if they conspired to cover it up. The defense argued that the police never actually investigated the possibility that the intruder theory was even possible. They essentially ignored it because they wanted these 3 men to take the fall. They also brought in Dylan's mother to testify that that 3-piece knife set that she had mailed to her son, she sent it missing that small knife that she said she kept for herself. Okay, Mom. Also, they brought in Dr. Henry Lee, who was the famed forensic expert on the O.J. Simpson trial. He testified that Robert's blood loss was internal. He said that the blood loss from the stab wounds pooled inside his body.
Sure, Jan.
On June 29th, 2010, after reviewing and considering the case for about a week, the judge took to the bench to deliver the verdict. Her 38-page decision was read to the court over the next 47 minutes, and she pretty much dismissed this entire intruder theory. She shredded the character of the 3 men, and she said that she believed that they knew more than what they were saying, but the prosecution didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. She said there's a difference between moral certainty and evidentiary certainty. So she found them all not guilty.
That makes no fucking sense!
The aftermath? Well, heartbreak, mostly. Robert's widow, Kathy Wone, filed a wrongful death suit, like a civil suit, and she eventually reached an undisclosed settlement. Joe, Victor, and Dylan each invoked the Fifth Amendment when asked any questions related to Robert's murder. No one has ever been held criminally responsible in Robert's death. Joe and Victor relocated to Florida. They still live together, as far as anyone knows. Dylan moved on and is now married, and Joe and Dylan have both changed their names. And that is the story of Robert Wone. That was a doozy. That was a doozy, y'all. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, look down in the description box. There's a link to a Google document. Click the link. It'll take you to it. You can fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! I loved my low-rise jeans, and I'm not ashamed of it. Hire intruder. I can't say intruder. To public community. Wow, I cannot talk today. You guys like my cherry blossom nails? Aren't they cute? Can you see? Oh my god. Where is the brush that I was just using?